Okay, we're live. Martin, welcome to being my guest on the Onward podcast. I'm excited to have you here.
Well, I appreciate you having me for sure.
Yeah. So when you what you want to talk about is business related, and so I was telling you before we started this that a lot of my podcast episodes aren't necessarily business related. Some are. I had a guy on that's going to be. I'm going live with him tomorrow. Mia. He talked about failure and the different ways to look at failure as in your
Right.
business. And he calls himself the fail coach. So, he talks about how failure is really not bad. A lot of times we think it is. There's so much we can learn from it. And the other thing I was telling you is that, in my last job as the director of the small business office for the Navy and the Marine Corps, I did a lot of work with small businesses. And when I retired, I started this podcast. I ended up getting some speaking engagements, and I really just kind of tie what I do when I speak now is I tie the Onward podcast to doing business with the government, because doing business with the government is a big challenge that you have to overcome.
It is. It is.
Yeah. And so that's what I talk about now. So I'm able to kind of tie my last job to this job, and it's kind of fun. So you want to talk about running businesses as well. So here, Dr. Tony Johnson, thank you for coming, Tony. So you wanted to talk about business as well and challenges that you've seen as a consultant with some of the businesses that you've been doing business with. And I guess also, your whole life you've worked with businesses, so you've seen a lot. So I'm looking forward to
learning. A long time. Yeah, I've seen a lot.
Yeah.
I spent 20 years with, we talk Control Data Corporation. I moved all over the country with them, and left there and started a value-add logistics company in Memphis. That's how I got to Memphis area, because the FedEx hub. Started that, and we grew that to about 50 million in the U.S. and Europe. I had a subsidiary in Frankfurt, Germany, for West Europe, and then thought I was going to retire, like we were talking about, and I can't do it. I just can't sit around. So I've been consulting for the last 16 years. So, and we talked a lot about challenges and so on before the show started. I mean, you want to talk about challenges right now, business with the COVID thing and what's going on. It is a challenge. All business.
Yeah, definitely. So you say that a lot of companies really don't have a good strategic plan. And I know when I worked in the government, I've seen a lot of strategic plans written, and then they get shoved in a desk drawer and no one looks at them again.
There you go. That's exactly it. I was on this with CDC. I was on a strategic planning committee, and every year we'd write a plan, and next year we'd update it and literally put it in a binder, and it was marked secret. Only so many people could see the thing. So what kind of plan is it? And you're right. We never looked at it again until next year when it's time to go review it. We start looking through the thing to see what it was.
Yeah, we say, oh yeah, I should have done that. So, and this applies to people's personal lives too. If you write up your goals for 2021 and then you don't look at them, and then the year can come and go and you haven't really accomplished. So what are your recommendations for companies as they write strategic plans and write their goals out?
Well, there's two issues, I think. One is change initiatives and strategic plans, execution of strategic plans. Change initiatives, 85% don't gain traction. In other words, they spend money for training, whether it's leadership development or sales training or whatever. And it never takes hold. And I know for a fact, at being in a big corporation, they sent me in numerous times to training, and you get back 2 days into the thing and it's gone, right? And why does it happen? It's easy. It's review and accountability. Nobody's accountable for that. You look at my own experience with businesses here in the last 15 years and my own. You have to evaluate why you want to make a change. Is it a reaction to a problem like sales? Maybe your sales are declining, so you get a sales consultant in to help you with training. Typically, that's a one and done. It's a short-term thing. They don't consider the underlying factors of why you're losing sales or market share. I've had clients that revenue declines, so they put pressure on their sales organization. I'm looking at them and saying, look, you're losing money on everything you're making. Why do you want to sell more of it, right?
It may not be the sales.
Yeah, exactly. Your quality's poor. Your customer returns are high. Your scrap is high. You don't need to sell more of it. You need to fix what you have now. So I think the reason people initiate changes is in question. They react to a problem or a symptom, I should say. They react to a symptom, trying to address it, and then when they have that function, they lose track of it. It's the same with strategy. Nobody ever reviews. You just hit it on the head. Nobody ever looks at it again.
So Dr. Tony Johnson says, so why are strategic plans essential? How often should they be reviewed and to become integrated into the culture? First off, why are they essential? Are they really needed if people write them and don't even look at them?
Well, that's a great point. And I'll tell you, the honest truth is the plan is not the value. The planning process is the value. It's what you learn about your business. When somebody like me comes in, I make you defend everything you tell me. If you tell me your quality's high, tell me how you know that. Show me your numbers. So I make them dig down into their business and things bubble out of that. And yeah, the result of that is a planning document, but the planning process may take 12, 16 weeks. And during that, you're dropping out critical paths that you have to address. You're looking at strengths and weaknesses, opportunities, threats, SWOT,
right,
and creating goals, and then the value that I guess I provided, because I learned early on, is when I started doing strategic planning, nobody followed up on it. So I started bundling my service with execution. I forced them to. You should review a plan once a month, minimal. You should do a quarterly review that you reviewed your first quarter. What did you accomplish? What were the barriers? What are you going to do in the second quarter? And annually, you should review it again. And again, you're looking at your market, you're looking at your competitors, you're looking at your product. All that has to happen on a regular basis, and it typically doesn't unless you force it.
Well, and the thing too I've seen is that sometimes it's like only the top people writing the strategic plan, and then everybody throughout the organization doesn't really understand what the plan is, and they don't understand where they fit in the plan, and their performance objectives aren't tied to the plan.
You hit it on the head right now. I read a balanced scorecard. It was written. That book was written a few years ago, and they talked about 10%, 50% of businesses in the U.S. don't have a documented plan. 10% of those businesses execute their plan. So that's 5% of overall businesses actually execute a strategic plan. And they started looking at that, and there's barriers. And one of the barriers is only 5% of the company understands what the plan is. Mm-hmm. Nobody communicates to anyone, mm-hmm. which leads to varying expectations. The workforce doesn't know what's expected of them. The turnover, all that. People barrier. Only 25% of managers spend an hour or more a month on a plan. Back to your thing. 85% of executives' compensation isn't tied to the plan. Mm-hmm. It's tied to day to day. So right. The other is they don't budget for the plan. Same with change initiatives. If you don't, when you go to do something like a change initiative or plan, you try to force that into what you're already doing. You don't allocate resources for it. You don't allocate budget for it. So then you can't understand why it doesn't happen. Not only that, you pay somebody to do the opposite of what you're trying to do. Yeah.
So Tony says, I get it now. The meat lies in the planning and the information that comes from the guides in the plan. Yeah, he's such a rock star. Yeah, it's true. And so this is the other thing that can happen. I mean, I speak from, you can comment on this too. I speak from, working for the Navy and seeing companies writing plans and then having to write my own when I started my own business. And so you write it, you're like, yeah, I'm going to get this. And it applies to your personal life too. Yep, I'm going to get this, and this, and this done. And then everything becomes OBE, or you see this shiny object, and you go for that, and that shiny object, and you go for that. And you don't go back and take a look at your strategic plan and see if it even fits.
Exactly. Michael Porter is a professor at Harvard Business School, and he's a strategy expert. And he said the primary purpose of a strategic plan is to decide what not to do.
Yeah,
it's pretty interesting when you think about it, because you're exactly right. You chase interesting diversions. You've got to find out amount of resources, capital, human resources, and if you don't have a vision and you don't have a direction, you're off chasing things. You're wasting those resources because you're not focusing them.
Yeah. And then I went to University of North Carolina. They had at the Keenan Flagler Institute, they had a course on strategy, and they're like, does budget drive strategy or does strategy drive budget?
Great question. That's right. That's
Do you,
great.
I mean, does
And
it
what you
depend?
usually
Or,
have.
like you can write your strategy, but then you don't have a budget for it.
That's exactly right. And it typically happens that way. So, Dr. Tony asked a great question about the value of a plan. That one of the things that I've learned over the last actually 16 years now is I don't sell strategic planning. I don't talk about strategic. I talk about repeatable business development.
Mm-hmm.
And what does that mean? It means you have an organization that can deliver a product at a price the customer accepts, at a quality the customer and sees value in, and you make a profit at it all the time, every time. Why do you do that? You do a strategic plan.
Yeah.
And people will look at it. Everybody wants more profitable business, but nobody wants to do a plan. But they don't realize without that, and the value is learning more about your business. You'd be surprised that founders even, they know segments of their business that they're comfortable with, but they don't know their business. And somebody from outside, an old man like me, it's been around 45 years, can spot things pretty well.
So as the leader, when you invite your different team leads or different people from your organization in as you're doing the strategic plan, and you say, we're going to do this, this, and this, and somebody else lower down in the organization maybe says, well, what about this or that won't work? You've got to listen to that.
Absolutely. And part of the reason you can't do, I think personally, now maybe I'm biased in this, but I did plans in my own company too. When I founded my company, it was a dead startup. I had 4 employees when I started. And when I got out, I had 550 in Memphis and 120 in Europe. I remember when I hit my first $1 million a month payroll, it scared me to death.
Yeah.
Turn $1 million every month. But I never had a strategic plan. I didn't know how to do it. I actually didn't know how. I worked on it with a corporation, but I didn't learn anything from that. What I had was a really strong value proposition. I'd solved a problem for a big company, and I said, man, everybody's got this problem, so I'm going to solve it for everybody else. And we developed some technology, and we had a strong value proposition. But the company made it just because I was probably brute force as much as anything else, because I had everything I owned in it.
Yeah. I mean, there might be times you might be fortunate that your company's going to make it without a strategy, but yeah. So here's a question. Justin says, communication, culture, schedule, product, the deliverable crush. How do you balance throughput, like establishing a strategic plan with wide and deep understanding and keeping your output, your head above water?
Great question. And it really is. That's one of the things that I tell people today. In fact, I was on another podcast just last week, and he was a culture expert. Culture today is critical. I mean, 10 or 15 years ago, it was more of a soft thing. Everybody said, yeah, this is our culture, integrity, or whatever. But with the workforce today and the job, you look what happened in the first quarter of last year before the COVID hit. There wasn't any people to go to work. People were stopping their growth because they couldn't hire people. If you know about a workforce that and it's not money. Money doesn't drive a workforce. I mean, it's recognition, it's understanding, it's contribution. I mean, he's exactly right. You've got to create an environment where they participate, and there's some value in that job for them, because there's a lot of jobs out there, especially when you're looking at a manufacturing where, some of my clients had some fairly tough environments with manufacturing. I mean, it was dirty, it was hot, whatever, in their plant. You've got to give those folks something other than just $15 an hour. So how do you work that? Again, it becomes part of the plan. One of the elements of the planning I do is we look at culture. We look at trying to create employee engagement. I don't remember the statistics exactly off the top of my head, but you look at employee engagement in the U.S., it's something like 30% are actively engaged, and the others either disengaged or actively disengaged. So over 60%. I mean, so his point is right. The harder you push them, as they're disengaged, you just yourself.
And I think he's saying too, like, How do you balance all of that and writing a strategic plan, but you've also got to keep the company going?
Well, I think the strategic plan is developed at a higher level, but you have to communicate why it's necessary. You have to communicate how it affects the workforce. Why are we doing this? I mean, example, one of my clients a few years ago did rubber compounding for oil and gas and that kind of thing. And that was a tough environment to work in. And all these guys saw was, after mixing rubber, just these big piles of black, looks like hot tar.
Uh-huh.
So we started putting pictures of what that stuff goes in, just to show them, look, what you're doing here.
Important.
In an aircraft tire, may go in a packer. So I mean, you've got to involve them. So, but back to balancing them, I think part of the issue is most businesses don't have good KPIs, so they don't really know what the workforce is doing. So when they manage off the P&L is a lagging indicator. They look at something 30 days later and try to go back and address it. I mean, I think you have to have KPIs. I think you have to share those with the workforce. I think you have to share them why that's important, how they contribute, what that means to the business. I mean, all that plays into it. I mean, a business if it doesn't make money, you don't have a job. But by the same token, we need you to do that, right?
Yeah. I don't know if this is the same Al Craft I used to work with or not. You can't tell from the picture. I don't think it is. Or in my experience, understanding, appreciating why you make the choices you do in strategic planning is more important than what you come up with. Yep, that's what what Martin was saying. And an empowered workforce can more strongly and productively align around why than what. Has that been your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. It's exactly what I just said. Why am I doing what I'm doing? Well, how does it affect me? I mean, they're human beings, right? I mean, people want to be recognized and they want to see what they're doing matters, right?
It is the same Al Craft. Al, we need to have a meeting. I mean, I haven't talked to you in such a long time. So my sister works in change management, and I'm not going to reveal too much because she's on LinkedIn. Somebody might be able to find her and everything. I don't want to share everything that I've heard, but it seems to me that change management is a tough thing, because if you have an organization that's global, or just even in the country, you've got people all over, and maybe you're trying to implement a new IT system or whatever, and people like the way it normally works fine now, and they don't understand, and people can hold out and just wait until this change management initiative is gone and just, wait you out. I mean, what are some recommendations you have for implementing change?
Well, I think if you're going to implement change, you have to advise everybody in the company. This is why we have to make that change. This is what happens. It's competitive. It's cost, whatever it is. This is why we have to do it to remain whole. And this is how it's going to affect you. And this is what we need you to do to help us get there. Rather than just saying, come in one Monday morning and say, we're going to do this today. And that's typical. What happens. Okay.
Right.
New rules. This is what's going to happen. People have to understand it. Now, there are going to be some that aren't going to participate, and you've got to fix that. But for the most part, they've got to understand.
Yeah. And you've got to pay attention, and it's not always necessarily the managers. They may understand, but it's, people way down the chain can also hold up.
Oh, absolutely.
Initiatives.
Absolutely. Way down the chain. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I used to do help with acquisitions and did some on my own. And typically what I do is kind of wander off into the plant when they allow me to do that, talk to folks. It's amazing what you learn out there compared to what they're telling you in the boardroom with the presentation.
That's for sure. So let's see. I'm looking at some of the other things that you said. So we've talked about you talked too about leadership development programs really you feel don't add lasting value.
Again, it's barriers. They don't look at the barriers. Typically when I do strategic planning with a client, leadership always falls out as an issue, almost always.
Mm-hmm.
Once you see that, and where you see that is something like when you're doing a SWOT and you have the staff in there, and you're talking about strengths and weaknesses. You look at the interaction between the CEO and,
Yeah,
and
yes.
start. Yeah, exactly. What's he going to say, right? I say what he thinks. So it always falls out. But addressing that by itself, without looking at the barriers to that, it just doesn't add value. And usually it's a one and done program. So I don't think it happens without ongoing either coaching or some kind of accountability coaching.
I think it's helpful to a leader to have. When I first became a senior executive for the Navy, I was able to get a coach for the first time. I wish I had had one way longer, but I got an executive coach. And what I liked about Marcia is that she could go talk to the employees and to other people about my interactions with them, and she could report back to me. And it was, I didn't know who said what.
Yeah.
I got some really good feedback that you wouldn't normally get if you just ask them.
Absolutely.
Tell you.
And that's part of the problem with execution too, is with either change management or strategy, whatever. Nobody wants to tell the CEO, hey, this is a problem in my department, because number one, you're on the hook to fix it at that point. So they try to keep everything from them.
So what do you recommend to a CEO that really wants to know the real deal and thinks that they're approachable? Like, I thought I was approachable, but I know people still wouldn't approach and tell me stuff. What do you recommend?
Well, I think.
Sorry, my dog heard your dog.
Yeah. I had the door closed. I was trying to. I don't know. I saw somebody on the street. She hates somebody walking on the street. It's private, okay, for her. I forgot the question.
No. Yeah. So, how does a leader really find out what it's?
Well, I think you're exactly right. I think having a, one of the things we used to try to do at CDC was do reverse performance reviews. Well, nobody's going to do that in the right mind is going to do that, but a good coach or consultant, they'll go down and tell. And there was one in particular, it's a government contractor I worked with as a consultant. They did flight training, and all military academy grads, which you think leadership wouldn't be an issue.
Well, West Point or Navy? I went to Navy, so I went to Naval Academy.
Navy, I'm sorry.
Navy, West Point, yeah, clearly there's a problem.
But it was the egos.
Yeah,
the ego was so big that it was probably the toughest environment I was in. And I thought going into that, this is going to be a no-brainer, but it wasn't. So I played that role, saying, okay, you've got to lighten up here. You got to understand this. So I think it takes somebody that you trust to go off and figure that out. And you got to keep it anonymous, or nobody's going to tell you anything.
Right.
And I did that with a client. Typically, I'll go on the floor and talk to folks and get their feedback and kind of work it back through and say, okay, this is what we've seen. But I think it takes an outside. It's pretty unique for an individual to take criticism from their underlings and really take it to heart. I think it's harder.
Yeah, it's hard. But you talked about when you go to a class. I mean, I know I used to go to different classes, and you go and you're embedded in the class for the whole week, and you have all these notes, pages of notes of things that you're going to implement when you get back. But when you get back, it's the same old thing. Life happens, and how do you really? Maybe 1% of what you want to get implemented, you can do.
I read a quote in an article in Harvard Business Review, and it was, I hope I can remember it, but it was the most telling quote. It said that what the reason the article was leadership development doesn't work. And they said the reason for that is the strength of the people being trained isn't powerful enough to overcome the inertia of the organization.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was really profound. I think because that's exactly it. You make one with the best intentions, but 2 hours later, boom, everything takes over.
Yeah, yeah. And I went to this class called Leadership for a Democratic Society, because there's a lot of leadership challenges that you have leading in the federal government that you don't have in business, and vice versa. Like, we didn't have a balance sheet per se. I mean, we had budgets and everything, but we didn't have profit and loss, I guess is what I would say. But we had budgets. But there's also like a challenge going on, like right now. Every 4 years, there's a change of administration. So the and it didn't really impact me until I got to the Pentagon, but the senior people leave, and then there's people acting for a while until the confirmations happen. And then the new people come in, and then they have to get up to speed, and they have ideas that are different than the last administration. So we might have been going this way, and now we're going this way. And for the career employees, it's just hard. That's a leadership challenge in itself.
That would be a tough environment to work in. I was talking to somebody in New York, and he was a consultant a few weeks ago. Anyway, he worked for the New York City as a consultant for the New York City Housing Department. I thought, who would do that? I couldn't do it. I mean, you're right. You're exactly right. It's a totally different environment. I mean, there's a almost guaranteed employment in the government too. So, I mean, you can't really, there's no way to motivate them. You have to truly motivate them. And I don't know how you do that. It's tough.
Right.
Everybody looks at it and says, I can wait this out for 3 years and something else will happen.
Right. Especially and then that's with some civilian leadership, but then you have the military people coming and going too every 2 or 3 years. So people do wait it out. It really is a leadership challenge. You have to really communicate and ensure that people understand their role in accomplishing the mission. That's really important. And the military has an important mission, and a lot of people do see their role. But like you said, some people, depending on what they do, may not see the importance of this piece of paper, or this military move, or, like you said, that rubber that's going in the tire. It all counts. Yeah, exactly. It all matters.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So one of the other questions I think you're going to ask me is, why don't more people use consultants and coaches?
Yeah.
I think that's our fault.
Oh.
I do. I think back when I had my business, if I had a board when it started, and I wasn't going to go in the board and say, I don't know what to do here. I'm going to figure this out myself. And it's hard to bounce it off your staff. To some degree you can, but you've got to figure it out. And I was lucky enough to be able to do that.
Right.
But a lot of folks just don't ask for help. And I think there's such a variance of the skill sets for coaches and consultants that there's not a lot of trust there.
Yeah. You're probably right. I mean, like, to be a coach, you don't have to be certified. I think to be a consultant, you don't have to be, there's not like a certification. So you got to look at the person's background and everything. Exactly. But you're right. I mean, as when you get high up in the company, when you're the head of the company, you don't want to be always going home and talking about it to your husband or your wife, and you don't want to be bringing your work home. You have a board, but the board is for other things. Yeah. It's not really for you to come and be like, oh, I'm not sure about what decision I should make, or an insecure decision, or, you're not sure if the people like you, or you don't want to be like, well, people are resistant to change and just be whining. You want to be confident.
Yeah, exactly. You go to more than twice, they'd probably be looking. They know where the problem was.
Yeah, it's you, and it's really not. But I mean, it's that's one of the things I want to start coaching in, is the mindset that it takes to run your own business, because I've seen it from the government side, to do business with the government. Now I've seen it in setting up my own company. I mean, it's hard, and you've got to keep pushing and persevere, but when you don't have other people to talk to. So I think masterminds are good. I also interviewed somebody one day last week, like masterminds, like maybe some other COs that you can talk to, maybe who aren't in your line of work, because you don't want to be like, my company's failing, and the other person like, yeah, okay.
Exactly.
But someone said, make sure you have your own personal board of directors, and who should be on that board. It's up to you to figure it out. But yeah, let's see, we have a comment here. Oh, when you refer to the HBR, not having a phone become compounded by Ms. Harmon's comment about new leadership. Do you think there's an importance for those dreaming big to grow their network sideways? Yeah. Growing your network sideways. Yeah, go ahead. Comment on that.
That is a good idea. Exactly. I do. Mm-hmm. Again, in my position, when I was a CEO, we were a pioneer in the industry. I mean, we were the first ones that did the value add logistics overnight, that kind of thing. not overnight shipment, but we did value add. We did repair. We did refurb. We like Apple North America. We handle all the returns, repackaging, that kind of thing. There really wasn't anybody to go. I had FedEx, I was one of the biggest shippers, but they were also trying to knock me off to become a logistics organization. So it wasn't anybody I could go discuss it with, right? So if you had that parallel path, I think that'd be valuable. I don't know that it's always available though, because you're exactly right. If I'm a CEO of a company and there's a guy across the streets in the same business, I'm probably not going to ask him, "Hey, how do you do this?" So
right.
It's got to be a supportive thing. One of the things I'm trying to do is trying to build some collaboration with CEOs, with some kind of mastermind that they're non-competing CEOs.
Right.
And we're going to launch that actually Friday, so I don't know how it'll go, but just to give them an option to open up and talk.
Right. Yeah, I work with some other coaches, and we had a call tonight just before this call, and we were going through something that we coach our clients on and seeing, well, how do you coach this? How do you coach in this? And I had some handouts and some worksheets and some things that I would do that they didn't have, and we shared. And because there's enough to go around. I mean, one of them, the Florida, Atlanta, there's plenty of work, and no problem with sharing. It just makes us all better.
Yeah, exactly. And it's good. It validates what you're doing. And so I agree.
Yeah, true.
One of the, I guess the thing I bring to the table for a business owner is I did it. I sat there for 15 years and it doesn't mean I know everything, but I can empathize with them. And between the two of us, we can usually figure it out.
Yeah. So what would you recommend to a company who's got problems with change initiatives, the strategy's not working? I mean, besides, maybe hiring somebody from the outside, but what if the CEO, if it's a small company, they just can't, hire somebody? What would you recommend that the leader do?
Well, I think the biggest thing is listen.
Mm-hmm.
When I was back when I had my company, when I first started, I knew everybody, literally. We started in a 15,000 square foot building and wound up in 575,000 square feet with 500 employees. And I got to the point I didn't know everybody. And I had an HR manager that said, "Why don't we have a breakfast with the CEO once a week or once a month?" I don't remember. And I thought, that's a dumb idea. Why is it people going to come in early to have breakfast with? And I was kind of sensitive to the CEO title. I had trouble looking,
right.
So anyway, I did it, and I'll tell you, that was great. We saw each other on a kind of a personal level. Some folks I did know, some I didn't. But if you listen to them, the message they take out back into the floor is, "Hey, they got us listening." So I mean, if you got change initiatives, you got to be able to listen to the folks that are saying, "You want me to change, but this is what I'm doing now. We got to work together to solve it." I mean, right now, CEOs are sitting there thinking their processes are working one way. They're not. They're working around it, whatever they have to do to get the job done. And so when you force a process change down, they ignore it. They're going to do what they're going to do anyway. And part of the problem is you're not listening to them. You're not listening why the original process doesn't work. You're not listening why they can't get it done. So the biggest thing is just communicate. I mean,
and I think listen and then show that they were heard.
Yeah.
Sit there and listen, and then you're like, go back and do the same old thing, and then they don't even feel heard, and they're like, fine, not saying it, I'm not telling him again.
Well, I told you before we got on, I think I used to do some turnarounds for the large company I was with. And one of the things I always did was just hit the low-hanging fruit and change something. Somebody tell you something, say, "Okay, I can fix that. Let's go fix it."
Yeah.
And then you get them believing in what you're doing. So it's that simple. People need to see. They need to see you're serious. They need to see you're going to execute, and they need to see you listen to them.
Yeah. So I mean, I think small business owners that are watching too could just go and create their own board and start their own. If they can't afford a consultant or don't want to hire one, go create your own board and of people that you trust and your own mastermind. And one of the things I want to start doing, I don't know if you've done it before, is I would love to lead retreats with, like, I don't know, women small business owners, and have some luxurious time and some networking time and some self-care time, but also some time to network and talk about business challenges.
Yeah.
I
No,
think
I haven't done it. I've been to a lot of them with both my own company. We used to do a lot of that then, but I haven't done it then. Which book is in your business Bible? I'll tell you.
He's written 2 books, so
Yeah, I got 2 books. Go look at it. Years ago, I read a book called No Nonsense Management. It was written in the 70s by a guy named John Slocum, and that was one I thought he had a quote in there that it probably doesn't resound too well today, but he said, "There's no measurement at all for effort per share." Pretty cool.
Yeah.
But, actually, my first book, Bottom Line Focus, I can't think of the name of it. It's got a bunch of questions now at the end of the chapter, and that's been pretty well received. I'd leave it behind at the founder or CEO's office, and I go back and I can see the answer questions. And so I think it's kind of a primer for a small business.
Yeah. And they can get that from your website right there, martinharshberger.com.
They can get that, or Amazon. Amazon will pay me 60 cents or something for it, whatever.
Making rich.
I think they get $9, and I think I get 60 cents. But
yeah. All right. Let's see if we have any other questions. Ask any more questions, and we're going to kind of wrap it up, I think. So that was a good question, Dr. Tony Johnson, about which book has been your business Bible. There's so many good books to read in so little time, right?
That's true. One of the things I think that I emphasize when you talk about books, there's always a kind of, football analogy. Everybody's looking for the big play, the answer. The football games are won blocking and tackling, right?
Mm-hmm.
Fundamentals. And that's what I try to teach or drive into organizations. Get your fundamentals down, get your processes down, get your KPIs in place. Then you worry about the big play, right?
Right.
So a lot of business books, you have to look at what are they trying to give you some magic answer, because there really isn't any. It's the same now as it was 20 years ago. You still got to have the fundamentals in place.
That's really true. And just as a new business owner, because I just started mine about 18 months ago, I've noticed that there's a lot of people that are saying, "Oh, do this, do that, do it this way, do it that way. Here's this how you write copy. Here's how you do this. Here's how you find your clients." And you can just get overwhelmed with everything that you should be doing. And the thing is that they are all selling what worked for them. Exactly. And it may not work for you. So you have to know your company, and you have to know yourself. Because what might work for Martin won't work for me, because let's say Martin's this huge extrovert, goes out and meets everybody. I'm an introvert, so my style won't work with Martin's. I can't do exactly what Martin did. So you've got to know yourself.
Actually, I'm an introvert too. So,
but yeah, isn't that true? You got to know yourself and
absolutely, yeah.
Style and what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
So I think my doggy is saying, "Come on, Mom, you've been in front of the computer all day today."
The Boston Terrier is what you heard. I got immediately a Boston Terrier, but she's
okay.
Yeah.
What a great night tonight has been. Oh, good. Thank you. To sit at the feet of a legend.
Oh, thank you.
Grateful. Good.
I'll send that down to my wife if I could get a screenshot.
Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, because it's really good to hear from somebody who's started their own business, and had it grow to where you had, your first, when you had like over $1 million in payroll a month. Yeah, that would make me panic. I don't have any.
I can't wait to believe me. I thought, holy Moses.
Yeah, you've worked for large companies and smaller companies, and you've consulted with them all. So a lot of experience and expertise that you shared here tonight, and I really appreciate it.
I enjoyed it. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah. So Justin says, thank you so much for your time and combined insights, experience, empathy, knowledge, natural, so real, most appreciated.
I
Al,
appreciate
you
it.
better
Thank you.
call me or contact me through LinkedIn Messenger. I haven't seen you in years. Rob Wong says, oh, so Rob and I work together. He used to be the director of small business, government contracting and small business development at the
Oh,
SBA under the last administration. So thank you for your valuable input. Entrepreneurship isn't something we ever learn formally. We learn it ad hoc for the most part. Yeah.
that's an interesting thing. I saw a quote somewhere where somebody, it was on LinkedIn or Facebook, or somebody put out, how do I learn to be an entrepreneur? And the guy said, start a business. That was the response.
Yeah.
It was pretty good.
Well, and I get it because like I worked for the government, right, for 38 years, right? And my last job was telling small businesses how to do business with the government. And I knew I didn't understand everything, but I just have so much more of an appreciation for it. Well, my parents owned their own businesses too, so I saw what that was like. But when you really just get your feet wet and, hands wet and get in there and blood, sweat, and tears in it, that's when you really learn.
That's true. That's exactly it.
Yeah. Well, you can stay on, Martin. I'm going to end the broadcast here, but thank you everybody for watching and listening and for your comments and engaging in the conversation. It was awesome.